Dream is dead.
I mean, of all the quality players, all the storylines here, Seth still in play for a 4th Grand Prix title.
Yeah.
And still in play this weekend.
See both players start with some lands that enter the battlefield tapped. Manfield with the Sandstorm Citadel, Jones with a Temple of Triumph. Seth will play a Thoughtseize, and we'll get a good look at Kevin's hand. Stoke the Flames, looks like he has 2 of those. 2 copies of Mantis Rider, and then an Outpost Siege and a Goblin Rabble Master. Somebody kept the sketchy one.
Well, I think that Kevin mulliganed by the looks of things.
Indeed.
He's on the draw with 6 cards in his hand here. But he kept on top, so Seth knows that's got to be a land.
That doesn't have to be.
I guess it could be a Wild Slash. I think Kevin's probably digging for lands right now.
Yeah, it looks like he... Seth's got a real decision to make here. I mean, Kevin's hand is pretty strong if he's able to run off back-to-back lands.
The other thing is there's no real hold to pick in this hand. The only, non-redundant piece here is the Outpost Siege, and I don't think Seth wants to take that with the opponent on a 1-land hand. So.
I don't think so either. But it is a difficult decision to make here for Manfield, and that's why he's going to take a moment, consult his hand, and then make a decision.
It's one of those games where Thoughtseize almost feels like the mulligan. This is like,
in a way.
Okay, none of this really matters all that much. I would have preferred this to be anything else.
He would like to maybe have a Cabal Therapy instead of Thoughtseize, but...
Therapy were really good.
Here's a Temple of Triumph. Top card going to stay on top here for Seth. Kevin with Flooded Strand, unsurprisingly, plays a land off the top of his deck. Seth with the Plains here, and now there's, of course, a Krufix. So we'll see the top card of his deck is a Forest, and he'll pass the turn back over to Jones. Jones will draw. That's a timely one.
Sure.
See, it makes it look easy, keeping the 1-lander on the mulligan, and now he has a Mantis Rider on turn number 3.
Technically, didn't even need the Scry land.
Yeah.
They're just already ready to go.
Yeah. So timely draws here for Kevin Jones.
Would have been better served with Mystic Monastery, so you could actually argue he got unlucky.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'll be arguing. We'll go back Manfield's way. Manfield will draw a Forest. Top card of the deck is a Windswept Teeth. Courser, get into work here. Windswept Teeth looks like it's going to come in, and it will. That'll trigger for Seth. He's up to 16. Top card after that is an Elspeth, Sun's Champion. Can Seth, a member of Team TCG player. That involves Ari Lax, Chris Fennell, Craig Wesco. Looks like Brad Nelson's on that team now as well. But the mastermind behind the Obs on decks for these gentlemen is Steve Rubin. As here's an attack for 2. Kevin going to take that damage.
Not willing to risk an Obs on Charm there.
Bioblight as well.
Well, Bioblight...
I guess that just kills it outright. Yeah, never mind.
That was my initial instinct, too.
Yeah.
It's like playing around Bioblight, but that can't be it. Obs on Charm is the one card here that makes sense. On the flip side, though, the attack is free for Seth. The only risk is, if he cares about getting hit by a Rabble Master token, and he's probably playing something to the board this turn.
We'll see the top card of Seth's deck here in just a moment as he deploys the Siege Rhino. Top card's a Thoughtseize. Rhino, a very difficult card for these Jeskai decks to beat. Now, they did get a new tool in Valorous Stance, so that certainly helps to take care of the 4 or 5.
Yeah, 5 toughness is really a flashpoint against Jeskai aggro because Stoke the Flames is their biggest removal spell. So Valorous Stance helps a lot there. But Siege Rhino's trigger is still so valuable in a matchup that often comes down to a damage raise.
Dig Through Time was the draw here for Jones. So you can see he's only got 1 blue mana in play. He'll use Stoke the Flames to take care of Courser. And he will pass the turn back. Thoughtseize will be the draw here for Manfield. You see the life total 16 to 14 in favor of Seth. Rhino's going to come across 16 to 10 now. The follow-up is another Courser. Take a look at the top card. It's a Temple of Malady. That'll join the party. That'll gain Seth a life. He's up to 17. We'll see the top card here as he does Scry. Sandstorm Citadel is going to go to the bottom very quickly. New card coming here for Manfield. It's another copy of Thoughtseize. We'll see if he plays the one that he has in his hand.
At this point, Seth's developed enough of a cushion of a life total here that Thoughtseize is actually fine. And given the nature of Kevin's hand here, which is a little chunky, I think the next Thoughtseize is going to be good as well.
Hey, you see the hand here of Stoke the Flames, Outpost Siege, Dig Through Time, and Goblin Rabble Master. Those cards are all pretty good on their own, but not great in the situation that Kevin is in right now.
It's really weird for the first Thoughtseize to not be very good and the second and third Thoughtseizes to be powerful. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah. But they're good enough.
Yep. And Jeskai Aggro is not a deck that plays particularly well from behind. So when you're playing against Abzan midrange and they get ahead on the board and their cards are a lot more powerful than you, it's a very tough spot for this deck to climb out of.
Jones will take a draw step here. Picked up a copy of Wild Slash. He'll play a Rabble Master now.
He doesn't really have anything else to do.
Yeah.
Can't dig through time, can't cast Outpost Siege, and not a lot to be gained by casting Wild Slash.
Goblin Token will come in, run into Courser. Mantis Rider will come in the air. And we're going to head back Seth's way. Seth will draw that Thoughtseize. We'll see the top card of his deck now from Courser is a copy of Abzan Charm. Perhaps a Hero's Downfall here. We'll see. He's going to go with Read the Bones. So we'll get to see the Abzan Charm. Won't get to see this one, though. Of course, the interactions with Scrying and Courser of Crufix, a little bit unique.
Right, the second card down is technically not revealed right now. Once it's being drawn, it is. So you see Seth have one up, one down, and then reveal both cards after the Read the Bones resolves.
Bob Light's the top card of the deck now here for Seth. He'll play a land, which will allow him to gain a life thanks to the Courser.
This is a matchup I was never thrilled with from the Jeskai aggro side of the table, because I think that if you're going to try to beat Abzan midrange with an aggressive strategy, you need to be capitalizing on the fact that they just don't do anything for turn 1 and usually turn 2 as well. Trying to beat them with an aggressive strategy where your curve more or less starts on turn 3, I think is a very difficult game plan, because at that point their Hero's Downfall start lining up the right way, and Siege Rhino is a card that's very challenging to race. And you're kind of seeing elements of all of this right now.
That's the problem I have with the matchup is Siege Rhino is so hard for him to beat. Valor Stance certainly helps, but Siege Rhino is so very tough. And looks like Abzan Charm here from Seth is going to pump up Courser, pump up the Rhino as well. And now it's going to be very difficult for Kevin to win. Even though he did peel running lands to get into this game in the first place, another Rabble Master is certainly not going to help, and he's going to concede the game. Seth Manfield going to win game number 1 here over Kevin Jones. Abzan midrange very quickly up a game here over Jeskai Aggro as we turn our attention to the sideboards, and we will start with Kevin, which you have in front of you.
2 copies of Anger of the Gods, 2 copies of Burmaz, King of Oreskos, 2 copies of Negate, 2 Disdainful Strokes, a Dig Through Time, an Elspeth Sun's Champion, and End Hostilities, a Glare of Heresy, an Abzan Advantage, and a Race and a Valorous Stance. Typically, Jeskai Aggro converts into a slightly higher end deck here. The counter spells are very good in that respect, the Negates and the Disdainful Strokes. And the additional copy of Dig Through Time, the Glare of Heresy, the Valorous Stance, and the Elspeth Sun Champion are all pretty solid to bring in.
2 Erase, 3 Drown in Sorrow, 4 Fleecemane Lioness, Sorin Solemn Visitor, and Nissa World Waker, a Garruk Apex Predator, 2 Glare of Heresy, and End Hostilities. The 15 cards Seth has access to. Again, Fleecemane Lions or something in the sideboard the Team TCG player used to great effect at Grand Prix Memphis. They didn't win the tournament. Jack Fogle did that, but put a lot of players into the top 8 and top 16. Probably a matchup we'll see him bring him in here.
I like the Lions here. I like the Glares, the End Hostilities, and I think the Sorin is also nice. Because the game is often about damage raise. Even if Sorin doesn't stay around for very long, just one hit it can be enough for, if not for Seth to win the damage race, at least give him the time to get to things like Elspeth and his other late game cards.
Jeskai Aggro deck that Kevin Jones is very familiar with. Todd Anderson is too. We sat down with him for a deck primer about the deck. Here he is to make you more familiar with this strategy.
Jeskai Aggro is a blue-white-red deck that thrives on efficient creatures and burn spells. Goblin Rattlemaster and his tokens can take over a game if left unchecked, while both Mantis Rider and Stormbreath Dragon have flying and haste to pack a punch. Your burn spells can clear a path for Seeker of the Way while pumping it with prowess, or just finish off the opponent with a flurry of direct damage. Stoke the Flames can end the game by itself when drawn in multiples. The deck struggles against cheap removal and life gain effects like Siege Rhino. There are also a few annoyances in the format that brickwall your whole plan, such as Hornet Queen. To win, Jeskai Aggro must control the pace of the game with proper sequencing and well-timed aggression. Stumbling in the early game with Jeskai Aggro could spell its doom.
And Jeskai Aggro is an interesting deck because it's one that was very popular once Concept here did come out. And it was the deck to beat for a little while, and then it slowed down quite a bit. Mantis Rider kind of went away, Jeskai tokens came to play, and now it's making a bit of a resurgence.
Well, the deck is typically really good against green decks. The more, Mantis Rider is kind of the tilt card for this deck. I think you're not necessarily good against Heroes Downfall strategies, and you're not necessarily good against Lightning Strike strategies, but you are very good against everything else. And these Green Devotion decks do not like playing against Jeskai Aggro. They're too fast out of the gates. They can break up mana creatures. They fly. The recipe is really tough for Green Devotion. You also get to sideboard into things like Disdainful Stroke that keep people off their big plays. So with a resurgence of Green Devotion, we see a lot of green-white this weekend. Some people I know are on mono-green. Green-red is always floating around the fringes. Jeskai Aggro is a pretty solid choice for this weekend.
Well, Seth Manfield will be on the draw this game. Kevin Jones on the play. We'll see if Jones can tie things up here, or Seth will walk away and move on to 10-2. Again, Manfield, three-time Grand Prix champion at only 24 years of age, and now he has a Pro Tour top 8 on his resume as well. Pro Tour Fate Reforged, playing Burn, which I'm sure is something you probably like. You approve of that deck choice?
I don't dislike it.
I had a feeling. Kevin Jones, though, last year was a good year for Kevin. A lot of success in the Open Series circuit, played in the Players' Championship, Legacy World Champion on the Eternal weekend. Pretty skilled, starting to make a name for himself, playing some more Magic now.
First to market with Jeskai Aggro in a sense, too. I mean, the first big finish, week one is kind of cheating, but the first big finish, and a lot of the philosophy of his deck did carry over to, future builds.
Yeah. His build carried over a lot to how people built their deck for Pro Tour Construct here. Sean McLaren, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare that you see someone really get it close to perfect week one. There were some minor changes, but for the most part, he nailed it.
Yeah. Especially in this standard format where so many of the cards you're playing are predicated on what your opponent's playing. It's not so much an issue of raw power as it is about metagaming. Week one, there's going to be some degree of uncertainty. Even the Pro Tour list you go back and look at, there's some pretty obvious ways to improve them now with hindsight, but at the time, you're working with just the best information you have. And because the standard format's not really that much about linear strategies, white, blue, heroic sort of qualifies. Some of the monocolored beatdown decks kind of qualify. A lot of your card choices are contextual. And so you can look back at these deck lists that don't look good, but, it's just where people thought they were at a certain place in time.
Well, let's see game number 2 here as these players take a look at their opening hands. Jones going to take a mulligan here. We'll see if Seth wants to keep his opening 7.
Kevin's list is going very big this weekend. He's got 2 main deck copies of Sarkhan, which we do see from time to time, though infrequently, and a main deck Elspeth. So that's much higher than these builds typically go. Most of them sideboard into packages like that, but game one, it's pretty rare to see.
See if Jones can find a better 6.
I think Kevin just piled and presented and
Wants to shuffle a little bit
Yeah.
more. There we go.
Since near the top of the list of suspicious play is the pile and present. Not.
It's not, it's not one I would recommend.
Right.
Let me say that. It's not one I would recommend.
How you shuffle? Well, I 6 pile, 1 hearty riffle where I break the bridge and just put it in front of my opponent.
Here you go. Temple of Triumph will start things off for Kevin. Temple of Silence here for Seth. Top card to the bottom. We're going to head back Jones's way now. He'll take a draw step. It's a Temple of Epiphany. Top card stays on top for Jones. Back Manfield's way. Temple of Silence. Seth will think a little bit on this one. He'll put it to the bottom. Perhaps a thought sees. Nope. Just going back to Kevin, who does have an Elspeth in his hand. Looks like his draw step was a copy of Outpost Siege. There's a Flooded Strand. He'll kick it back over to Seth.
And Kevin is definitely situating himself for a very long game
Yep.
here. You know, he's got a source of card advantage coming here in Outpost Siege. He has no pressure. Elspeth in hand. Sort of trying to play Seth's game here a little bit.
One thing to note on Seth's side, 3 lands, none of them tap for green right now. Kevin got to get himself an island. Draw step time. Flooded Strand here for Jones. He'll sacrifice Flooded Strand yet again. Down to 18. Plains or island coming. There's Plains.
And I think he might be out of lands to Flooded Strand for.
Okay.
And because I think he has an island and plains in hand. And he's got 2 Flooded Strands left in the deck, so keep this in mind.
Oh, there's an Outpost Siege.
If he hits a Flooded Strand here, yeah, he's going to need Seth to play Nurburg for that to do anything.
Cons is the name here for Jones. We head back Manfield's way. Manfield will play a Thoughtseize. We'll take a look at Kevin's hand. You'll see the island of plains that you did mention, along with a Dig Through Time and an Elspeth. So a much slower draw here for Kevin this game.
But this is pretty nice if you assume that Seth has just sideboarded into a lot of creature removal. Trying to play this longer attrition game might cause Seth to overvalue cards like BioBlight and just not be able to keep up with your card advantage engines.
These are the games that we have seen Kevin win with cards like Narset before. Now, he doesn't have that this particular weekend, but we've seen him do it before. He's going to cast Dig Through Time now. So look at 7, of course, take 2 with him. Now we head back Seth's way. Outer End will take care of the Outpost Siege. Good draw, actually.
That's a big draw. Actually, probably better than drawing a green source of mana at this point.
6 mana. Elspeth. 3 soldiers coming. We'll head back Seth's way in just a moment.
Even with Kevin up some cards, the cards in Seth's deck are so much more powerful that as long as Seth can suppress the card drawing on Kevin's side of the table, Seth should have a fair amount of time to draw out of this and eventually get to his more powerful stuff.
Well, Glare Heresy and BioBlood will take care of all that stuff. So that problem's solved. See, both players have sideboarded in some weird configurations here. Seth is a lot more reactive, it seems, though he doesn't have green mana. And then Kevin has sideboarded in kind of like a slower, bigger deck because he's got End Hostilities in hand right now.
Well, there are degrees, right? I don't mind Kevin going bigger in terms of let's bring in the Planeswalkers, let's bring in the counter spells, the additional dig through time. I'm not a fan of End Hostilities here because I think Seth just plays that game a lot better.
I do too.
Now, with that said, Kevin's got some bad cards in his deck to take out. He's got 4 copies of Lightning Strike and 3 copies of Wild Slash that don't kill anything. So he's got a lot of sideboarding to do anyway, but I think it's a stretch to bring in End Hostilities here. There is only 1 copy. It's not a bad safety valve to have, but I think that's Seth's game plan here, not so much Kevin's.
Glare Heresy will take care of Brimez. And we're going to head back Jones's way. Looks like Negate was the draw here for Kevin. Here's an attack with Seeker. And now another Seeker.
And for all the early advantage that Kevin's generated and he's, resolved dig through time and so forth, if Seth just has Siege Rhino,
Yep.
we're at a dead end. We're at an impasse.
Well, Llanowar Waste was the draw. So green mana is finally found. And you mentioned it. If a siege round just comes down, the brakes are put on. We'll see what this is. It's Fleece Main Line. That's not bad either.
This is the same as Siege Rhino.
Yeah. At this point, it kind of is.
Yeah, Kevin can't get through this.
Here's Bermaz. Pass the turn back. Kevin relying heavily on this negate. And you see he was thinking about casting it out of Savers for Maz, so it looks like he's going to let it go.
And now what happens if Seth goes monsters with the Fleece Main Lion? Now End Hostilities is off the table. No more attacking on the ground. And, oh, by the way, Seth has 4 spells in his hand.
Another Fleece Main Line. This is a card that was used to great effect for Team TCG player Grand Prix Memphis. And it's certainly playing a role here in this game. Dig through time to draw, big one.
Honestly, Kevin probably has to end hostilities away this board. And if he's making an attack here, that's his plan.
Yeah. He's probably hoping that Seth will do some blocking.
Now, if Seth offers up some blocks here, then Kevin does not have to necessarily cast down hostilities. He can dig through time, get a prowess trigger, and go from there. But that opens him up to all sorts of problems if Seth has a removal spell in response, particularly Bioblight. Even a hero's downfall. If Seth gets to his turn and is able to monsters the Fleece Main Lion, last turn didn't want to do it because there's some risk of there being a removal spell in response and falling behind in tempo. But if the board looks relatively clear and Seth goes for it, at that point, Kevin does not have a lot of productive cards in his deck. We're looking at, Sarkhan's pretty good, as is Mantis Rider. There's some stuff, but
You got to go to the skies.
gotta go to the skies, and Seth still has a handful of cards.
Well, here's dig through time for Kevin. Trigger prowess twice. I think this is actually a pretty safe line here from Kevin because at this point, if I'm Kevin in this situation, I'm thinking, okay, well, Seth has probably cast most of his spells here that he could actually play. And so my assumption is, okay, well, you're stuck with green spells in your hand that you really can't cast effectively. You can only really play 1 per turn, and that would be my assumption. I'm not saying I'm 100% correct, but that would be what I assume here if I'm Kevin.
I think there's a reasonable chance that there's downfall in Seth's hand and he just hasn't had good opportunity or much of a reason to cast it yet.
Okay.
I think what you're saying also could be the case, but if Seth casts a downfall here, I wouldn't be stunned.
Well, he's reaching for mana. So prepare not to be stunned. There's a downfall to take care of 1 Seeker. Seeker will trade with the Fleece Main Line. Seth's left with a creature on the table. Kevin will gain a little bit of life in the exchange thanks to the prowess trigger. It looks like both players making sure life totals are correct here. But as you mentioned, if Seth, let's say on this turn, just decides, okay, untap, activate Monstrosity, might be in a pretty good spot.
Yep.
Yep. Time to get in for 4. Jones is down to 17. Seth has to take 1 to do that, of course, thanks to the Llanowar Waste, but 13 to 17. Now, Jones draw off of dig through time. He found some cards that he likes, and Sarkhan's an interesting draw step. Elspeth was another one. So he's got some Planeswalkers here, and we'll see how he wants to use them.
I mean, casting Sarkhan holding up Negate is not a shabby turn here.
I think he's going to try to hold negate as much as he possibly can.
Sarkhan plus Negate's a pretty tough squeeze for Seth to get out because he only has so many cards in his deck that interact with Sarkhan.
There's the Dragon Speaker. Going to get him for 5. Pass the turn back. So we've got Seth at 9, Jones at 17. And negate does put him in a pretty tough squeeze. So So Manfield's going to have to go towards Sarkin here with Fleet's main line. No surprise there, really. Down to 1. But if Kevin's able to get 8 damage out of Sarkin and force Fleet's main line to go that direction, it's done a really nice job.
Done some real work, yeah. Part of the problem now in Seth's position is, he has to try to play around negate and disdainful stroke, and some cards play around A but not B, which makes it pretty tricky.
Well, Siege Rhino is going to be cast, and it's going to resolve. Seth has to take 1 to cast it. Again, thanks to Lionel Waste being the only way he has green mana. Now he has a Temple of Malady, so a painless form of green mana starting next turn.
Yeah, that draw is huge. The scry here is very good as Seth is digging for specific action, and on top of that now can cast his green spells without taking so much damage.
Seeker of the Way, the draw. In comes Sarkin. There's a Seeker. Here's a Glare. And Jones still with Negate at the ready. Seth will draw.
It wouldn't surprise me if Kevin's intent here was to chump block and just hope that he can get 1, ideally 2 more activations out of Sarkin.
Mm-hmm. Bile-Blight. Oftentimes not a spell you really want to negate, but I think right now it's a pretty good time to negate this because I think he's in jump block mode for sure.
Yeah,
also, it's a 3/3 now.
Yeah, Kevin's hand is force here. He's trying to have Sarkin close out the game. If he gets 1 more hit in, then he's drawing to a bunch of different cards. If he gets in 2 hits, obviously that's lethal.
There's the block. He gains 3 life, 2 in the exchange. Time for another Rhino here for Seth, maybe? All right. Seth's making a bit of a comeback now. 10 to 14.
Again, that little bit of cushion is so important here. Because if Seth can get the Sarkin off the table after the next hit, then he's at 6, which is not safe by any means, but it's not an uncomfortable life total. And Kevin's taking some chip shots along the way from the Rhino, so Seth might be able to turn around and close the game out pretty quickly.
Time for Jones to take a draw. Seth is empty-handed. I believe Kevin has found a lightning strike, and he has. That's not too bad at all. Now this situation gets really interesting because I think the easy thing here for Kevin to do is say, all right, activate Sarkin, puts you to 5. But where do we go from there? I kind of like the idea of playing an Elspeth and probably minusing it and putting Seth to a decision.
With Lightning Strike in hand, I think that playing, and Seth empty-handed, playing Elspeth and plussing is pretty attractive. Because Seth's hand is forced to send a lot at the Sarkin. He, in fact, needs to attack with both creatures to ensure to get Sarkin off the table. And at that point, you can just say no blocks. You have 3 tokens on the crackback, plus Lightning Strike in hand.
Okay.
There are a couple ways he can navigate it there, but I think because Seth is empty-handed, he needs to draw something pretty specific to get out of this, assuming you just say no blocks and allow your Sarkin to die.
Well, there are some blocks here. Sarkin's going to go down to 1. Jones will untap. Sarkin on 1. Elspeth at 5. I'll take a draw step. Again, he does have Lightning Strike in hand. Here's 3 mana. That's a Mantis Rider. That'll probably make things real easy for him. 2 flyers up in the air. And that is going to get the job done. Kevin Jones going to win game number 2 here against Seth Manfield. Jeskai aggro, Obs on mid-range, all tied up here. Going to play a 3rd game.
Yeah, so you can see that Kevin's definitely planning on going a lot bigger here post-board. Hoping to have more raw power in his deck to be able to fight through removal spells and Siege Rhinos.
Both players going to go back to the drawing board here. You think anything changes? Play on the player of the draw, especially for Seth since he's on the play?
I don't know if there's any real huge swaps that go on. I think his good cards kind of just are what they are.
Okay, yeah, I think that, Seth still has the same game plan of, all right, I'm play Siege Rhino, it's really tough for you to deal with. Kevin clearly went a little bit bigger after sideboard. Seth didn't see the unhostilities. But, it's pretty clear that he's changed things up a little bit. Don't know if Rebel Master's out of his deck or not, but, the fact that he has, Elspeths and Sarkins and Dig Through Times, he's playing a much more like Jeskai control strategy, I would say, more than a Jeskai aggro strategy.
I will say that if Seth brought in Drown and Sorrow, which I don't think he did, I think he gets cut for game 3.
I do too.
It's clear that Kevin's going bigger, but setting aside Drown and Sorrow, I think all the cards have about the same value no matter what plan Kevin's on.
Okay. Against Seth's sideboard here, 2 Erase, 3 Drowning Sorrows, 4 Fleece's lines, which I imagine are still in the deck. They were pretty useful during that last game. A Sorin Solemn Visitor, a Nissa Worldwaker, a Garrett Apex Predator, so a small Planeswalker package. 2 Glare of Heresies are obviously in, and then an additional End Hostilities, 2 in the main, 1 in the board. End Hostilities is kind of an interesting card in this matchup, but I don't think that, well, it's actually kind of hard to say, right? Where I didn't think that Kevin would have a lot of creatures after sideboard, but we saw Seeker of the Ways. We didn't see Rabble Master, and then we saw Mantis Rider at the very end of that game, so maybe End Hostilities is still okay.
I'm curious. I'm honestly really curious how Kevin sideboarded because we saw Lightning Strike in his deck still, which is, you know, maybe he knows about Fleecebane Lion, maybe he's anticipating it, but that seems to me, after Wild Slash, to be one of the first cards that would get cut because the Obzon midrange deck doesn't really produce any targets. It's Courser Krufix and Siege Rhino, Planeswalkers, and Tassiker, and so on. So I'm really interested to see exactly what Kevin's configuration is like because there's a couple cards there I did not anticipate that we would see that showed up there. Most notably, the End Hostilities and Lightning Strike.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Really, the targets, they don't exist outside of Fleecebane Lion. But if you followed Grand Prix Memphis, you know the Team TCG player, we're basically boarding in Fleecebane Lion against everything, which is going to inform the way that Kevin is going to play his games and how he wants to sideboard. Because I agree with you, I think the Lightning Strike is overall pretty poor in the matchup. You're not really going to kill anything, and dealing 2 damage to deal 3 to someone, well, that's an ideal use of a slot in a deck. You certainly don't want to use 2 cards to kill a Siege right now.
It's going to have moments of being drawn and being good because someone's low on life, or you can pair it with some other removal spell to get a problematic card off the table. But Lightning Strikes in your opening hand are not the kind of cards you want to be drawing here. So I don't know if Kevin has some sort of burnout plan or if he just is anticipating Fleecebane Lion. But there were some surprising cards there that I saw from Kevin in Game 2. Keep in mind that the Lightning Strike was never revealed. At the end of the game there, Kevin did play with Mantis Rider. If Seth saw Lightning Strike that game, it's possible he pulls the Fleecebane Lions out. Because that's not a one-for-one trade you're really looking to make. But since that's still concealed, I don't think Seth's going to make any big alterations to his deck unless he brought in Drown Sorrow, which I doubt in the first place. And on Kevin's side, I also think the sideboard is pretty light. The only play-draw bias card that I feel like is in Kevin's list for this matchup potentially is the End Hostilities, and he had that for Game 2 while he was on the play.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, your assessment of Wild Slash is so bad, Lightning Strike is pretty mediocre to bad. We'll see, you know, how much players want to change here as they do get ready for game number 3. As Kevin is back and ready to go. Players going to shuffle up. Our time is correct. We've got 21 minutes to play here for game number 3. So we'll see who's going to win it between Seth Manfield and Kevin Jones. Been fun to watch so far. Will continue to be. You see behind Kevin, Royce Walter. He's our undefeated player. And we've got Andrew Boswell playing against Jarvis Yu. So some players making some deep runs here.
Jarvis, a associate of ours, Maryland area player.
Big Jarvis fan. Everyone's a big Jarvis fan.
And the Boz, of course.
Well,
beloved.
How can he not? Team Toy Wiz?
Yep.
Free tickets to the gun show?
Yep.
I swear every time he has sleeves on, he loses.
It's true.
It's not a joke. It's true. He just doesn't.
Direct relationship, as far as I can gather.
What else could it be? Nothing else makes sense.
I'm not a superstitious person, but if you ignore patterns, you're an idiot. You know?
I'll keep that in mind. Quotable quotes by Patrick Sullivan.
Eventually, I'll release my book. It'll be like one of those calendars, you know?
Oh, that sounds like... So, would it be like a calendar, you know, 12 months?
No, 365.
365, just like one of those rip it off and throw it away,
exactly.
just another quote every time?
Right.
I like, oh boy. I'm not saying he'd be a millionaire, but you'd be a millionaire.
Yeah.
That's easy.
I got a lot of side interests.
That's easy. We're gonna get that going. I know some people. You know, it's not quite next level deck building.
No, it's not.
But you know, different strokes for different folks.
I do see this as a springboard for books on tape and similar ventures.
Okay.
Laying the foundation.
I think we'll start small. We'll work you into the Star City Games newsletter.
Oh, thanks.
And then we'll get you into the calendar market.
Really, you'd have me in the newsletter. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can make some space. Carve a little out for you. That's the least I could do.
I was actually contacted by someone over the newsletter to write a your pack, my pick little segment.
Yeah.
But then had to admit that I have done 0 drafts with
Well,
Favor
the honesty is appreciated.
Well, I sort of ran sideways on that one draft that I did with you, but then you vetoed my pick when you told me to make a pick, and that was the closest I've come to doing a draft.
It was the worst pick in the history of picks, so that's why I vetoed it.
All right. Well,
And I lost the draft in the first round, so maybe you were right.
probably color screwed, right?
Tough to-
Didn't take the dual land.
Hey, a Thoughtseize. It's a Lightning Strike, a Sarkin, 2 Elspeths, a Mantis Rider, an Island, and a Shivan Reef. Jones with a Temple of Triumph in play. So the necessary lands to cast Mantis Rider here. Elspeths are clearly very expensive, but the game is probably going to go a little while, so Seth has to keep those in mind. Sarkin was a game winner in the last game we watched. And then Lightning Strike again, kind of the odd duck here.
I mean, if Seth has a removal spell in his hand, a pretty easy path here is take Sarkin, kill Mantis Rider, strand Lightning Strike. Now your hand's effectively 2 copies of Elspeth. I don't know what Seth's hand looked like, but there is a path to do some real damage to Kevin's hand here.
Well, Seth certainly has a difficult decision to make
Yeah,
because he's taking a while here with this one.
He made the face of, I kind of don't want to take anything.
Yeah. Also kind of the face of, this is really annoying that you have Lightning Striking against me.
Well, if he has Fleecemane Lion and a removal spell for Mantis Rider, I think Lightning Strike's a pretty clear-cut choice here because the rest of Kevin's hand's so clunky.
Decisions here for Manfield. He is just not quite sure what to take. But he's going to go with an Elspeth. That's
Okay.
telling. Temple of Malady is the follow-up. Take a look at the top card. Seth does have a Windswept Teeth and a Sorin in hand.
That was the card I think he would, if I had to guess, would be the least inclined to take. So I'm really interested to see how his hand shapes up now.
Island and pass here from Jones. Windswept Teeth. Seth will pass it back. Jones not going to go upstairs with that Lightning Strike just yet.
He was looking like he was about to go at Seth's noggin there.
Yeah. Teach him a lesson.
But, you know, Seth has Fleecemane Lion. The only reason to run that sort of play, I think, is if you had Dig Through Time in hand already and we're trying to set up your delve, but...
Temple of Triumph will allow Kevin to put the top card to the bottom. Seth going to sacrifice a Windswept Teeth. I have to imagine a Plains is on the way.
And Kevin did have an opportunity there to just cast the Mantis Rider. He has untapped mana in hand, but I think correctly deduced that Seth's got to have some removal spell in this spot. And get that comes into play, tap land out of your hand. Maybe you can set up a spot where you have Mantis Rider plus negate back up. Maybe Seth taps out for a Siege Rhino, and then you get an opportunity to at least hit once with your Mantis Rider. So I like the discipline there of not casting the Mantis Rider.
I like that play just so much better because you want to be able to make sure you at least get 3 points of damage. Now, yes, Seth gets the opportunity, as he's going to play a Temple of Silence here and Scry. He gets the opportunity to play Abzan Charm and pay 2 life to draw 2 cards, yes, but I like the fact that, you know, what Kevin's doing is saying basically you're going to have to keep some mana up for the rest of the game to make sure you don't get at least hit for 3 by Mantis Rider once.
And keep in mind, Seth also Thoughtseized him earlier on, so he's aware of the Mantis Rider. He elected not to take it. He passed with 3 mana up on turn 3. There's just too much to indicate that this Mantis Rider is no good right now.
Well, he's going to go for it now. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if this dies from Bioblight or Hero's Downfall, Abzan Charm, what have you. But the situation's a little bit different now.
Given how Planeswalker heavy Kevin's hand is, I think Seth would be loath to use a downfall if he can avoid it. The other removal spells seem very good to use here.
And Bioblight is certainly one of them. He'll use that. There's a Flooded Strand, pass the turn back. Manfield will draw a card now. Copy of Siege Rhino. Never a bad time to draw one of those. But Seth's going to sacrifice a Windswept Teeth. He'll get himself a Forest. Colors seem to be all online.
And getting the Siege Rhino in play out in front of Sarkin, as it were, is a pretty good spot to be in.
And there is Siege Rhino. Jones down to 17, Seth up to 17. Tie game, even though it might not feel that way. Heading Jones's way now. He'll take a draw step. Stoke the Flames. Gonna very quickly sacrifice, we think, a Flooded Strand. Still second guessing himself a little bit. There's Shivan Reef.
I mean, on the surface, the coast is clear for
Sarkin.
But you got to feel like, this is probably going to get tagged by a downfall, or there's going to be an Obs Uncharted on the Siege Rhino. I just don't know if Kevin's hand really lets him do anything else. He can't stoke and lightning strike the Rhino. He can't cast I guess he can pass and cast the dig.
Which is a fine turn. I like Sarkin maybe being able to get 8 points of damage here. You get in for 4 here. Siege Rhino attacks it down to 1. You get 4 more points. Siege Rhino finishes it off. This will at least change the way that Seth has to play the game, presumably.
Yeah, and I don't think dig through time is an acceptable play here.
I don't think so.
Taking 4 and let Seth continue to develop his board.
That makes things a little difficult.
That's what we call the worst case scenario if you are Kevin.
Soren's here. Siege Rhino has lifelink. Seth is going to gain 5 life. He's also going to take care of Sarkin. And now Kevin's got to deal with 2 very problematic permanents coming from 2 different angles. Now, Kevin can still work his way back into this thing, but it's important that he draws a land right now. There it is. This allows him to play Elspeth, allows him to minus Elspeth, kill the Siege Rhino. Now it's Elspeth versus Soren. And this isn't so bad for Kevin, but it had to be that turn.
Yep. Although now Soren transitioning and cranking out some 2/2 flyers can threaten Elspeth, and if Seth rather just has downfall or some way to finish off Elspeth, Kevin needs to reload with dig through time.
Well, Seth already tapping some mana. Feels like a hero's downfall, and he has that. Now, as these exchanges take place, you mentioned dig through time. That's the big one. Kevin does have that card, and there are 5 cards in the graveyard, so dig will cost 3 right now. And that's not so bad.
Though he is running out of some meaningful cards to draw. Kevin now with no copies of Elspeth left in his deck, for example.
Jones will untap. Time to take a draw step. Bermaz, not bad. You take a look at Kevin's hand. It's very interesting. He has 2 lightning strikes here. So lightning strike looking a lot better than I think we thought it was going to.
Well, definitely against the Fleece Main Lion plan, it's a pretty solid card.
Yeah. I take that back. Only 1 lightning strike. Other red card to stoke the flames. Now, Kevin's tapping there might be a little rough because he can't play Bermaz now.
Well, I think his plan here is to dig through time instead.
Okay.
I mean, you are right. The tapping of his mana takes that off the table. But he does have a different line of play he can take here and just cast the dig through time.
So we're going to go down another vampire token in for 2. Jones down to 14. Here's dig. Seth just passing the turn back, so it seems as though his hand is rather reactive at this point. Jones going to take a look at 7 cards here with dig through time. He'll take 2 with him. Life totals here, 18 for Manfield, 14 for Jones. Kevin's got a real decision to make with this dig through time. Outpost Siege, negate in there. His hand has Stoke the Flames and Bermaz. Mana's a little awkward right now with only 2 white, though it is pain-free.
So it's still a struggle for him to get on the board here. He's got some good reactive cards, some good sources of card advantage, but the Soren is problematic right now.
And Jones will draw, Seeker of the Way.
It feels like Kevin's post-board configuration has a lot of disparate plans going on. There's a mixture of some kind of low-impact aggressive cards like Seeker of the Way with a lot of Planeswalkers and an End Hostility, a bunch of Counterspell. It's kind of mixing and matching as he goes.
There's Bermaz. Looks like Seth has a removal spell here, or at least something to do at the end step. Doesn't have to be a removal spell. Seth even a little unsure of himself right now as he'll take a draw step. So we're going to go up. because, well, it can't go down.
Also going up here is pretty sweet.
Yep. Glare of Heresy, perhaps? Yep. This might get a reaction from Kevin because he does have Stoke the Flames in hand, but he also has Negate to protect, so he will negate the Glare of Heresy. You mentioned that going up here is pretty sweet, hard to argue. That's a murderous cut. That's pretty good.
And not a good sign here for Kevin that Seth is electing to delve here, leaving himself with 3 mana up.
Gotta get that Sorin off the table in these vampires. Sorin is really starting to run away with this thing.
That's been the whole game. It allowed Seth to, at no cost, trade up and get Sarkhan off the table. Now it's generated 2 vampires. Now it's gained, dealt +2 plus gain 6.
Shivan Reef the draw. Jones will play Seeker. Deploy the Reef. See if he wants to play Outpost Siege or not this turn. Looks like he's just going to go Stoke the Flames. Now, the question he has to ask himself is, do I want to take care of a token or do I want to take care of Sorin?
I think he should probably get the Sorin off the table, since next turn he can cast Outpost Siege, get a Prowess trigger, and start getting some life back. So the 2/2 flyers don't matter that much, but the Sorin is a much bigger long-term concern.
He's going to go after a token, however. You'll have to take 1 to cast that, as it only has 1 red mana that's pain-free. Seth with a Bile Blight's going to take care of the Seeker of the Way, so that's not something that Kevin can rely on, and Sorin continues to run away with this thing. There's a Windswept Teeth that Seth is sacrificing, so I wonder what this is going to be. Oh.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
It's an Apex Predator.
Not a bad way to top off the curve.
And, this is really what you mentioned, right? Where it seemed like Kevin was trying to go toe-to-toe and play a longer game, and Seth is just better equipped to do that.
It's telling to me that the game that Kevin won was the one where he was able to get Sarkhan online and just chump block and hold off for long enough. This sort of game where he's had a mixture of reaction and aggression, I think Seth's just much better equipped to play it.
And Seth Manfield is the winner of this game and match here against Kevin Jones. Abzon mid-range will take care of Jeskai Aggro 2-1. Manfield, 3-time Grand Prix champion, Pro Tour Fate Reforged top 8 competitor. He is 10-2, and as you mentioned right at the top of the match, has the opportunity to top 8 this Grand Prix and maybe win a 4th Grand Prix, and he's only 24.
Yeah, a potentially incredible accomplishment, still playing for top 8 as you mentioned, and I think